You guys know the movies. You go see them every summer.
My family, where are you?
Maybe even earlier or later nowadays. Yep, I'm talking about the blockbuster. Those movies that you've been waiting years to witness just to see your favorite character in action, whether it's for the first time or just the third time in the franchise. But unfortunately, I have to let you in on a little secret. They suck. They rarely live up to the hype, the critics always destroy them, and these budget slash box office earnings are ridiculous. So the expectations are always big and in most cases are unrealistic. The hype normally starts with some big debut at a convention like Comic Con, and yes, let's face it, most blockbusters nowadays are comic book films. We get our first glimpse of our favorite character in a trailer, and the hype is huge. This is supposed to be the biggest movie of the year. It's Spider-Man. How can it fail? Do you guys remember The Force Awakens? That was the biggest movie since the Avengers. But imagine how it would have been if the movie sucked. It would have been considered one of the worst movies of all time, hated on like the world was ending. We know this because of what happened to The Phantom Menace. People were so excited for a new Star Wars movie in 15 or so years that people were initially afraid to say that the movie was bad. People were fanboying out. Of course, nowadays, the movie is terrible, but there was support initially, just because it's a Star Wars movie. This happens every year, unfortunately. Hype is expected, it's needed for these movies in fact, but they need to be realistic. Just because X-Men Days of Future Past was great, doesn't necessarily mean that X-Men Apocalypse was going to top that. It shouldn't have to. Movies, especially ones in a franchise, should be judged by their own basis. You should enjoy seeing the progression of your favorite character. You have to understand that the character is in a different place, for the better or worse. Your favorite director may have studio interference and can't give us his vision. Maybe the story won't be there because their name is a draw. Understand the expectations of both the audience and the studios. Of course, some of these expectations can get shot down once the critic reviews come out. Boy, they can be brutal, as you'll see in a few. Critics have grown from the newspaper column and Robert Ebert type of reviews to people being able to record themselves on their phone and post videos on YouTube within an hour. Everybody's a critic nowadays. See, the traditional critics see the movie first. They can make or break a movie's success. I had a coworker once tell me that before they were going to look forward to go see Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. After the critics' reviews came out and attacked the movies, he said that he'll probably skip the movie. To me, it was a chance to see Batman take on Superman on the big screen. I wasn't going to pass that opportunity up because somebody thought the movie was bad. But a lot of people will be like my coworker and not go see the movie because of what the critics said. You have to understand that these critics tend to view movies on a technical level. They'll talk about the themes, cinematography, acting, and story mainly. Batman vs Superman has flaws in those categories for sure, but you can't go into a movie where people in tight spandex run around that serious. It's just their opinion. Let's talk about its score on Rotten Tomatoes. The top critics gave it a 23% and the audience gave it a 64%. Some critics said, "It's made for the people who love comics and know the history between the characters." This is what's making YouTube a big area for movie reviewers now. These vloggers tend to talk about the experience of seeing their favorite movie in theaters, then talking about the movies like they're scientists. Most blockbusters come out in the summer because that's when the demographics, kids and teens mainly, are free to go see these movies. They advertise for these crowds mainly. Critics of the traditional sense have taken the ability to enjoy the film out of the conversation. Let's look at the critics versus audience score for Suicide Squad, being at 19% compared to 63%. The critics said, "These movies are made to stuff popcorn in your mouth. I dislike the sequels of Transformers because technically they're bad, but I enjoy seeing Optimus Prime and Megatron fight in every movie. That's why I go see a Transformers movie, not to judge how a scene was shot and the meaning behind the government crap." Which leads me to why these sequels and blockbusters in general are being made in the box office. Now this is going to be the most boring part, but bear with me because this is the most critical part as to why blockbusters suck. Most of these movies are being released within a 3-month or 15-week or so time span from May to July. This means that every week there is a new movie being released to challenge the previous box office #1 spot. It's hard to maintain relevance and longevity doing this, which is why there is so much emphasis on opening week numbers. These same opening week numbers can also predict if a profit will be made or not. And let me tell you guys, these budgets are ridiculous. I made a list of almost every movie that came out in the summer, and those big hits that were sprinkled throughout the year. And most of these films have a budget of over $100 million. Yep, you heard that right. $100 million. I haven't seen outstanding special effects in most cases, and some of these budgets goes towards people's salaries. Now, if a movie is released every week that can possibly top your film, why would you make a movie with $100 million budgets? It's like playing Russian roulette and hoping you make a big profit. It's a big risk, but if it pays off, you can expect to see part 2 within the next 2 years. Let's compare Captain America to its sequels. The budget for the first one was $140 million versus $170 million for Winter Soldier and $250 million for Civil War. Now the total earnings for the original movie was $370.5 million versus $714.2 million for Winter Soldier and $1.1 billion for Civil War. See my point? This is why we're getting to see these films branch off into their own parts of the year like Star Wars with December. There's no competition. The Force Awakens made $2 billion with a budget of $240 million, while Rogue One made $1 billion with a budget of $200 million. There's no reason to risk moving this franchise to summer just for its addition. It's proven that people will drive in the cold weather just to see people use the Force. At the same time, we're seeing sequels to movies that we know flop, but why? Well, simply the international market is saving these movies. A movie can bomb in the US but make back its money overseas, and we're seeing this more and more. Look at the domestic gross of these movies and then compare it to the international one. There's a big difference. Ever wonder why there's a scene set in China during the movie? Well, China has the second largest movie industry and consumers in the world behind the US. If something caters to that demographic within your movie, there's more of a shot of more people going out to go see your movie. Realistically, these blockbusters budgets needs to come down about $30 million, and we need the studios to stop taking advantage of one market just to make a profit. That's not a long-term strategy, especially with China in the process of making their own Hollywood, so they'll accept less foreign films in the future. My point is this: blockbusters should be cherished. It's like Christmas seeing your favorite franchise or character back on the big screen. But the experience has to be respected. We're not stupid consumers. Just because you hype up a movie doesn't mean it was done justice. I didn't wait a year or so to see Jared Leto play the Joker for 10 minutes. That's annoying. I skip watching movie reviews and reading them lately, especially if I'm highly anticipating a movie, so that I can go into a movie with a fresh mind and no biases. Sometimes the critics just don't get a go of a movie and understand what it's trying to do. But that's okay, but don't say I don't know art because I wanted to see my childhood on the big screen. And just because the title is Ghostbusters and I'm familiar with the franchise somewhat doesn't mean I'll go support the movie. There's some skepticism there with the formula being changed and it's being years or decades since the last one. So Hollywood, can we get blockbusters that don't suck?